This was a video that came out on Thursday. I'm going to put a little link in the corner for you if you'd like to see it at a later stage. It's all about how the chronometer changed the world. It's actually a much more fascinating subject than Black Bays and Tudor and all of the rest. It's a bit of history. It goes into looking at GMTs and world time complications. And the talk's going to be a little bit different. We're looking at something that came to me the other day when I was just kicking back. I think I was drinking, and the thought suddenly hit me. For some reason this week, all that's been on my mind is what's going on with the release of this new Tudor Black Bay, Blue Bay, whatever you want to call it. And I put out a video on Tuesday. I'll link that in the corner of the screen if you'd like to see it again as a replay in the future. I put a video out on Tuesday that was quite rushed and not as well thought out as I would have liked it to be. So the thinking here is to sit down and be a lot more methodical with this discussion. And I don't want it to be an all positive, all negative thing. I want us to actually really look at this quite centralized. Even if you're not interested in the Black Bay as a watch, if you're not interested in Tudor as a brand, I highly recommend you listen to this, because it's not just so much about the watch and the brand itself. It's about the whole catalyst effect. And referring back to the butterfly effect, there is some kind of link there with regards to a variable changing the scheme of things in its entirety. So it's poignant and important, not so much about the watch, but what it kind of means for the industry and the buyer's market, and what we've seen over this last week that I've done a little write-up, which we'll be looking at in a second. I like the term Black Bay Blue Navy. Has a nice alliteration. I think navy blue kind of breaks it up. The Black Bay navy blue, don't know. Even if you're not interested in the Black Bay as a line, if you're not interested in Tudor as a family, but saying that, there are some things you can learn about what this brand has done, how it's executed it so effectively, and from there we can, expand further. The butterfly effect. I don't know how I came across the butterfly. I think it was just one evening I stumbled across it on YouTube and thought, hey, there's some kind of link to this. A variable change in a system that can have a greater effect down the line. And I love these examples. This is definitely not scratching on the entirety of the butterfly effect, but just as a basic run through linked to the industry, this watch, as an example, can be something that we can look at very keenly under a microscope or a magnifying glass and say that it might just have a big effect on the industry that we see now, even though this piece is using a blue format. It's using stainless steel. This is not new. But the format of producing it in a smaller size, a size that seems to be a lot more appealing for lots of people. I don't know. It's a broad end subject, and there's a lot more to it that we can, of course, go through. Is it possible that the major players like Revolution, Hodinkee are simply paid to make favorable reviews? I said in the beginning, if that was the case, then all the validity goes out the window. And these brands have too much of an impact to do that kind of thing. And I mean, I know in certain industries like the game industry, the movie industry, there is none of that. If that was the case, then it would just destroy whatever foundation there was. Funnily enough, we think of Hodinkee. If it wasn't for Hodinkee and their promotion of vintage watches, we probably wouldn't see this piece on the screen right now. Bear that in mind. So really, the catalyst in the very beginning was Hodinkee starting out and presenting all of these crazy ideas for vintage watches and how they can be collectible and all the rest. So no, I don't think so. I really don't think that a brand as big as Hodinkee or Revolution would ever be paid off. The smaller reviewers, the same thing. If that is the case, then it'll be terrible, and I'm sure the news would break out. If I was sent this watch, that's something else to consider. If I was sent this watch, would I give it a favorable review or not? And I find it weird that when I listen to many reviews, they always give the positives. They always give what you can clearly see. It's blue, it's this size, it's great. But then they always hold back on the things that they don't really appreciate. I think Theo and Harris had a good point when he said at the very end, it'd be nice to see them bring out something different. But I mean, there can be a lot more details expanded upon there. As this goes through, this is like a 3 or 4 page document that I've written out, just a summary looking at the pros and cons of this watch, but also how the community has reacted to this thing. And as we go through it, I can then share the feedback that I received on the Black Bay video from earlier this week. And then there we can look at the pluses and the minuses. So this is definitely not me bashing on the brand at all. I don't want to do that. As Michael's saying, loves his Tudors. You should. with all the detail, as we get to the pros and cons, so many pros. There's more pros than cons. We're also dealing with a time in the world where profits are down, businesses need to make money, and this was just such an effective starting point, or should I say, springboard, that we are now going to see later on. So butterfly effect, chaos theory, it's an amazing thing. It's really incredible, and some great examples to look at. When you're breaking a rack on a pool table, you line up all the balls, we get ready, use the cue ball, you strike it. Those balls will never land in the same place twice. Similar to throwing a tennis ball into a pond where the splash will always be different. Weather conditions is a good example of chaos theory. And it's not exactly linked to this, but what I wanted to try and highlight is that this small event could make a very big splash in the industry for years to come as we go through. So let's get past this and look at the positives and negatives of this watch. Positives. I don't think this needs much of a expansion. It's a simple piece, perfect proportions. I think that's one aspect that needs to be highlighted. They have, without a doubt, nailed this watch when it comes to specifications like understanding wrist presence, not too much, not too little, comfortable. What you're getting as a package with a proper clasp, you're getting proper bezel, proper movement, all of this as we go through. The color scheme, this being coming from someone who has handled 7016 snowflakes in the past, the colors look phenomenal. They really do look great, and they've done a great job there as well. It's not too bright, not too dull. It has a lively appearance to it. In-house movement, as we've already said, that's great. Referring back to the price, I think that's important. Great value for money, as most of us know, and great resale. And that is part due to why people love this watch. We get to the cons though. The color. This watch, actually the watch in general, snowflake hands in general, you're dealing with a big crown, rivet-styled bracelet that doesn't need to be there. It's polarizing. Just the idea of the handset as it is. And the color is another factor that's polarizing, which is what I address in the next line, I think. This is my opinion on the subject. You can tell me otherwise, but I don't think blue is as versatile as black. Black is a color that we see the most often because of the fact that it's just so usable in any setting, whether it's changing out straps, whether it's various occasions you're wearing it to meetings, whether it's tuxedos, suits, casual wear. Blue, on the other hand, yes, it's unanimously loved. I love the color blue. But in saying that, is it as versatile as black? Now, again, if we have to bounce the idea further, the issue with this watch is, of course, it has a gilt dial. It has a red highlight on the bezel, so that is not the most easy to wear watch on a daily basis if you're dealing with colors. Just the idea of faux Tina that was mentioned in a show. Just the idea of the whole gilt dial and everything else. That was removed. Whether it's a good thing, bad thing, it's up to you. So this piece, the blue dial, I believe, is a much more stripped down version of the black. I think the black played it a little bit more creatively with the choice of a gilt dial and red highlights and all of those elements. In general, the stripped down version can be seen as a positive and negative. It's just as great when it comes to being a watch that you can wear on a daily basis. Is the watch as exciting, though, to wear? That's another thing. The gilt dial plays differently in light. The blue dial and the blue configuration would probably get a bit flattened in certain lights. It might even go dark, a darker shade of navy blue. I don't believe it to be just as vibrant as black, and this gold effect could possibly go. That's another highlight. But this is the one big aspect I want to highlight here. And actually, I'm going to try and embolden this as much as possible. You pay an extra 1,000 and you're in Rolex territory. Now, that's something we need to consider. That's something that needs to stay for a second. Not just Rolex territory. That's another point to mention. There are many other brands, Seiko's and the rest. Pay another 4,000 and you're in Moser country, Tim says. And this is one thing that's sparked my concern in a way. Why would you buy probably one of the most legitimate homage watches that pay tribute to a Rolex? And the question is, why would you do that instead of picking up the watch that really started it all? I meant OP. That's it, Alex. Of course, it's the very entry-level section of the Rolex territory. But even still, I mean, it's up to you. At the end of the day, it is up to you. Value for money, what brand you're buying yourself into. But I think it's just one of those aspects. It's definitely sparked my thoughts a little bit. And just another con that I want to highlight is that this watch is going to be sold. We could even say that a lot of the time, from a lot of this hype that's been coming up, it's being bought to be sold. And let's expand on this point. Black Bay effect. Oh, wow, I forgot I did this. A predictable release and ubiquitous positive reaction. Now, this can be for anything. This can be for pieces like APs. This could be for a Rolex model that comes out. The watch addresses what people were looking for, but does not innovate. I think it all pretty much explains itself. You know, it's not deep in there. This piece, though it looks gorgeous, the approach was cookie cutter. Yes, definitely was. The result is fantastic. People love the fact that it was released the way it was, but there is no extra level of innovation. There was talk about the material, the metal being a different color. Maybe they introduced more nickel into the format. Don't know. The blue color seems to be the one aspect that drives up the Black Bay effect in all the industries that we've seen lately, in all the areas. But SR Watch is saying, I think a lot of people maybe don't understand the significance of the blue dial Tudor and the links to their Navy Marine National Heritage. Very important point. And that is one thing that a lot of reviewers and newspapers, Telegraph, etc., they're expanding on this and talking about how important it is. One thing that they nailed was getting the color right. I said this in the beginning that I have handled 7016s in the past, some really rare ones. The South African Navy 7016s, I think there's only like 12 or 15 in the world known. And they really have done a good job with matching the color scheme, for sure. And that's really, I think if they had done the presentation a little bit better, I don't know if Tudor expanded upon this in their discussion or in their final, their unveiling. But if they had expanded on it a bit more about the Navy history, I'm sure they might have. They have a Breitling movement. I'm pretty sure this uses the same Breitling movement. The Black Bay effect, again, not linked to just this watch, but the general, the Q Timex is a great example of this too. We saw it last year. A litmus test, such a great comment that someone left in the video. It's a litmus test for the community. Forced hype and the sudden want factor. So when we see this watch being flooded in the market, we'll expand on this in a second, actually. I don't want to talk about it too deeply. Highlights cheap mentality. It's about the hot new model. I think that's pretty safe to say when we talk about pieces that are newly released and everyone wants to see. A business move, as Dino says, that's something that I wanted to expand upon. The characteristics, and those I would say are the negatives. The two top bullet points, litmus test, highlighting the sheep mentality. That's the top two, but the lower two are kind of positives. Characteristics show that the watch community wants what is offered. And this is important to see. There was lots of talk about the P01. I think this is a brilliant statement as well. The P01 was released last year to, should we say, negative feedback. I really enjoyed looking at it a year later as a retrospective, talking about it being this failed prototype that has a great development behind it, that it actually shows us what the in-between of development looks like. It's not this perfect thing. It's deliberately made to be something that's rough around the edges to show its prototype intent. Okay, so this piece, the way it was executed, again, going back to the pros of it being perfectly sized for what people want, not too big, not too small. Comfort factor, the way you can actually wear this watch on a daily basis. It's not necessarily too polarizing next to pieces like the gilt dial variant that we've seen. That's up to you. Next to that, something that's important, the last line, I say no creativity can sell. And this is one of my failure points, I think, in that video that I put out on Tuesday, very quickly, I rushed through it, is that you don't have to be creative to sell something. And this is the perfect example. I love talking about creativity and the idea of expanding upon ideas and all the rest. It isn't necessary. It isn't needed. We think of Apple and VW and other brands. They can create the same thing again and again and still sell just by making a few tweaks in places. And this is not a creative move. This is a business move, which I think is an important point to highlight. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. At this time, where we are in the world, companies need to make money. And we will see something else that was very well pointed out. I think Mark actually highlighted this on Instagram the other day. And then further on to this point, I say this watch may have a rippling effect in the industry, linking to this whole butterfly effect. A small movement in this direction of bringing out a smaller sized watch would possibly push, you can just see the feedback. As we get to the final summary after this page, the feedback has been so positive, unanimously positive almost, you could say, ubiquitous, it's better. It shows that people want more affordable watches that are great value, perfect. smaller in size, simpler in its appearance, and the blue is still a color that rules that everyone wants. So it's all these little things. Okay, but I want to get to the final summary, and this is what I have been, contemplating and thinking about the most over this week, actually. I think Dear Artifact said something. The P01 is evidence that Tudor is willing to live up to its slogan. It's just unfortunate that the design was misguided and they were punished for being daring. And that's the thing. I mean, it's almost like a retreat at this point. They're retreating back to something that they know is going to work. Good for them. I mean, it really is a good business approach if they can get a watch out like this that does everything that people wanted and satisfy what people want. But there's more. Let's just develop this. So this is what I've heard and seen as a summary in the market. Tudor has flooded the marketplace with the navy blue, which is a surprise. It's not something that you need to spend a lot of time, at least in the beginning. It wasn't difficult to find. I've heard so many people picking them up very easily. But the watches are already being sold on the gray market for between 500, 1,000 plus over list. And that's one of the negatives. This watch is being bought to be sold because of the hype, quote unquote, factor. In saying that, though, I just find it hilarious. I mean, the watch was kind of released the 1st of July. And within day 5, the 5th of July, they were already up for sale. Stickered, boxes, you name it. Clive saying, I think part of the reason for the hype is the relative scarcity of new releases for this year. And very good point. Actually, it was another point that was in my head. Because there hasn't been anything released this year of any real, impact, this is something that many can latch on because it is affordable, well executed, attainable, good looking. So all these little things. One more thing, social media, Instagram, YouTube, as you've probably seen, is flooded with unboxings and wrist shots linked to this watch. You cannot use the platform. I'm not even looking at the words now. You cannot use the platform to look at watches and not see them on your feed, which I find is unreal. It's quite amazing. I've never experienced it before. And that is, again, part due to attainability factor. People can easily pick them up now. The color is very expressive and vibrant, and people want a blue dial watch and everything else. The watch is being built up as the best release of 2020 by some reviewers and some brands. Of course, this hype is going to push the demand. Reviewers will continue to push the demand. And eventually, I think that, similar to the Black Bay 58, they're going to be selling them for a profit within the next 3 months, plus or minus 3 months time. And this just seems to be a constant thing where many are impulse buying this watch. It's not a connection thing. It's not, I love it because it's blue or because it's a watch I've been looking for such a long time. The majority of people are getting this because it's just there. It's something that you can grab because it's affordable in the scheme of things. But that then means that it won't remain in lots of collections because no one bought it with any kind of love for the watch. There's no deeper connection, as I said here. And this is like my final bullet point saying, you're being told it's great. Make up your own mind. Do not buy into the hype. It's like the most important underlying detail that I tried to emphasize in that Tuesday video. But another small detail, and I think you highlighted this, Mark, that Rolex has suddenly announced that they are going to be releasing models this year after Tudor's launch of the navy blue. The thinking is there's no fact or reality in this, but this watch, the release of this piece, is such a good springboard to tell the world that there is money, that people are willing to buy a new watch, they're willing to spend. As a business decision, it's, hey, well, we can release our new stuff because people clearly are interested in buying, so why not? And this was announced just earlier this week that Rolex wants to bring out their new lines of pieces later on in the month or the year. I don't know when exactly. But there we go. Black Bay 58 and navy blue. It's a watch that's been brought out that clearly people want because of its simplicity, because it's a new watch in the market. And yeah, I mean, we could just expand on this. Where's the redesign image? I don't have it open, Jamie, but it really wasn't that good. I dropped in the snowflake numerals and they weren't the right size. I looked at it again. It's great to be fine. Dr. Strangelove, that's this watch. Nefarion, that's a very good point. Thank you for that. Very good. But I hope you enjoyed it. And there's lots of other little factors. Like I tried to specify in this short video that I made that there are so many Black Bay blues already on the market. You've got the smiling self-winding 41mm variant. You've got the Black Bay 36 that I'm pretty sure comes in blue as well. And, call this a prediction, call this an assumption, don't know. But I really don't think a lot of these watches aren't going to stay in collections for long. I have a feeling that this piece, though it looks gorgeous and great, and the blue color is unique, it's very unique to the Tudor brand. And I think that's so important to focus on. As mentioned at the beginning of the show, that this watch really does capture what Tudor tried to do with their Submariners over time. I shouldn't say try, they achieved with their Submariners over time. Bringing that back is a great thing, but it's not the first time. I mean, I had the GMT up. I wanted to talk about the GMT and just how the attention has been pushed away from this watch now because of what's been going on. But the release of this piece, I think the appeal was even greater than the blue dial variant. I don't know. When this watch is released in a 58, I think we're going to see quite a big leap. The Pelagos is a watch that I think is just one of those pieces. It's the real sweet spot that the brand has been able to bring out over time. One of the main drawbacks, I guess, is the size. Why is the 39 millimeter popular and not the 41? Now, Mark, that's a good point. And, I've spoken about proportion and scale, but I think it also has a lot to do with the marketplace. Being someone who in general, the wrists are pretty small in places like the East. And you can appeal to a lot more people with a smaller watch that they know is going to fit better. I mean, I, for one, as much as I love the Pelagos, I could never wear it. It's just not a watch that looks proportionally right on my 6 3/4 inch wrist on a normal basis. But this size and scale makes it a lot more practical to wear, and at the same time calls back to the vintage cues of smaller watches in the past. So all these small things. Saying they're going to sell out and then resell them for at least 35% more. I'm predicting it. Good point. And that's what we've seen with the Black Bay Black, if I remember right. Dear Artifact saying it's smart release for a quick and easy success, given the current state of the world. However, it's just a bridge to hopefully really exciting releases following from the Blue Bay. And that's what we all hope for.